So, welcome to a fireside chat today, where we are going to be talking about practical ways to bring AI to the bank and wealth firms, and also establishing a repeatable process to keep implementing solutions throughout the bank and firm. I'm G, the Chief Commercial Officer here at TAZI, and we've been working with wealth firms and banks for almost 10 years now, implementing AI solutions that really help predict customer behavior and grow more profitably. Join with me today is Cathy Myers. Cathy, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, G. I'm really happy to spend time with you today. I am a banker by trade. I've been in a C-suite role for many years, driving P&L results through people for the benefit of our customers. But I've always had a passion for how technology, whatever that latest technology evolution was going to be, how to leverage that for my team and for my company and shareholders. So that's why I've been excited to partner with you on AI, because I'm still very curious how AI is truly going to impact the banking and wealth industry.
Awesome. And we've loved the partnership. We learned from you so much. So let's start with our first question today, Cathy. So for a mid-sized bank, what have you seen has been the safest and really clearest first AI use case to start with, and why?
I think the best use cases I've seen is when the company is truly trying to solve a problem. Now, that might sound simplistic, but when you start thinking about all the ways you could implement AI,
Mhm.
boiling it down to a meaningful problem, something people care about, something that's bothered them, something that's been a struggle for clients, that gets you the most traction and passion as far as a place to start. So, for example, bringing in together some of your top leaders and whiteboarding, what are the problems we have, and then perhaps like putting them on an XY axis, right? And say ease of implementation, highest impact, and then really honing on a meaningful place to start is what's best, I think, for that size of company.
You're right. We really actually have seen the same. What's been the most successful is just starting with one use case, right? One problem at a time and learning how the process works and then rinse and repeat. And frankly, we've seen most hesitation around data readiness. But when you break down that approach to just solving one business problem at a time, we've actually found that everybody's data ready today. Every bank and wealth teams, they have the basic customer data and they have transactions, and believe it or not, that's enough to start predicting a lot about what customers need and also what they may do. So absolutely, we've seen the same kind of approach work over and over again. But okay, well, I'll ask now next question, right? So when it comes to deciding what is that first use case, does it matter if the initial effort is revenue focused or efficiency focused?
Yeah, usually, what I suggest and what I've taught before is, to me, the sales continuum is more circular, right? So anywhere you start on a sales continuum, sales requires service, service leads to sales. So actually, anywhere on that circular adventure, I think has meaning. Again, the best place to go is when you've got an area that's passionate and aligns with what the C-suite is most focused on, let's say, for that year. So if they want to drive, let's say, client growth,
Mhm.
and you get in a room and you say, you know what, we really want to tackle retention first, then you say how. And that could be you're losing clients on a service aspect, or it could be because you're not actually trying to talk to them about their next sales product that would be best for them. But anywhere you pick on that continuum, I think as long as there's passion from leadership, it aligns with their goals, and you've got a sales team or service team that's like ready to jump in and learn, that's your secret formula. So it can be anywhere on the sales service continuum.
Absolutely. And who is not focused on growth, right? I'm personally really excited about all the productivity tools we have these days. I use them all the time. I hope everybody does too. And on the bank side, we have seen, folks starting with implementing Copilot, and that is really a great place to start on the productivity side and kind of learning what's possible. And as you mentioned in TAZI, we have been focusing more on that growth side, really helping marketing, banking teams know where to focus their time when it comes to retaining their clients or growing their existing relationships or even finding new ideal clients. But as you said, really where they start is just a matter of where the current focus is. where the current passion. I love when you say passion, because I do think at the end of the day, we do have these passions about our customers and how to help them. So what we have seen kind of on a practical way is just being able to give this team an opportunity just to kind of test what's possible with just the data that they have readily. And that being kind of a really good and practical, quick approach to decide about AI. So much that now as you know, developed the proof of value process that really is kind of geared to answer that. Are we data ready? What kind of value can we get question in just a couple of weeks? Because otherwise, I've seen, probably you too, right? Just a lot of analysis paralysis or just paralyzed, right? With all the information and options that folks are there. So yeah, just following the passion and, just starting small has been successful over and over.
If I think about where we started our journey together,
Mhm.
we talked, and I see this at conferences too. You talk a lot about like the definition of
Mhm.
data or AI. And so you talk about like, what is it? Right. And then you could go all the way to the other end of the spectrum where you're always very focused on what kind of ROI you can bring your partner. So how much money can I make from it? What kind of return can I get? But what we keep coming back to is that sweet spot in the middle. What can data scientists, what can your tool tell me that I can't figure out on my own? Something I didn't know. And that's the sweet spot, because once you say, oh, gosh, I didn't know that, and I can make that actionable, then you want to repeat it and repeat it.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been great kind of in teaching us that, right? Because when it comes to growing, a bank and wealth firms, there's nothing new, right? It's something that we've all been focusing for decades. But what can AI bring, right? That is new. And to your point, over and over, it really is that deeper insight, giving bankers, right? Giving advisors just to information that they can then use to devise their plans on how to approach really each and every client. It's been awesome to kind of watch what they do with the additional insights that we were able to present and stuff that we would never know or think about. And really actually kind of switching gears, speaking about that right now, you're like ready to do something. Speaking of the readiness, what have you seen in your conversations? And you mentioned, right, conferences, like everybody's out there trying to learn. How data ready are banks today?
Well, I think to what you said earlier, they're more ready than they realize. You can be on the smaller side, right? And your data that's available is, I'll say, more siloed, right? Like I have good checking information, but I don't really know about credit card transactions, right? Or I know about my core consumer bank, but really what my wealth customer knowledge is not readily available to me. So depending on your legacy systems, depending on whether you've brought it into a central data warehouse, I don't really think it matters, because as long as you've got your data, at least what you've taught me is we've talked to banks that are more junior
Mhm.
in their development of their database, and we've got others that are more sophisticated. And it seems that you've been able to work with either, and the output that you actually then give to the sales team or the service team to make it actionable can be an Excel spreadsheet, or it can
Mhm.
plug right Salesforce. So I found at least all the use cases we've done together, you've got a flexibility regardless of where you are on that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, the good news is actually reality is easier than a lot of us think. And just yesterday we had a conversation with an advisor that said, I get all these signals today. I get all these things that are happening to market and my clients, but like they're all individual. I have to now spend hours in trying to put them together. So as we were kind of talking about, the realm of possible, he was really excited about putting it all together, like get all these different signals and just give me, a bigger picture so then I can go and use all my knowledge to, to approach clients and help them in a much better way. And you're right, spreadsheets work. So little data is actually needed to get started, right? To just kind of get that MVP. And we have found that, to operate a bank or a firm, you baseline is you got to know a little bit about your customers, and you have the transaction data. So that really has been the starting point and what has work now time and time again.
One example that maybe ties a few of the things we talked about that I ran into was actually in a wealth management department. I think it was the trust group, and they had these reports that they had to do, I think at year end, but they had to pull in all these pieces of data that were lodged all across the bank, and it was very laborious. So that's a service task, right? That had to be done. And then they use that as a use case for AI to help them compile that report much easier. But their enthusiasm for that then said, oh my gosh, how could we use that then when we want to do a sales, effort with a current client or a prospecting effort with the next client? So that's an example of how, dispersed data brought in to help simplify a service task, then led into, et cetera. And there wasn't really talk about data readiness because the data was there. It was really the ability to access it more readily and then put it in a digestible format to get the reporting done.
Yeah, and we do hear, on the flip side, speaking of data readiness, we do also now hear more and more folks kind of saying, here's my data, I have data, what can I do with it? And I think that, it's just amazing to see because, we know that at that point, like folks are at least curious, right? And if you're just curious, you will start seeing value, and it's a that attitude itself is something that we've learned to look for, because you just have to have that base curiosity, I think, at this point in time to, to kind of just, be brave enough to start. And speaking of being practical, right? So of course, we promise here we'll talk about how to do this. So when it comes to, let's say, yeah, I am curious enough, I want to try this. What have you seen so far? What does the team look like? And what kind of typically folks should look to happen in, day 30, day 60, day 90, when it comes to, trying out, some of these AI solutions?
The labels that I use for the small team, right? So you can use a big team to create ideas, but I think your pilot team, and I always love to do pilots, just the word indicates small duration, small team. First, you need a concept owner. So that's someone who just in general is excited about AI as a technology and is excited to solve that problem. So they're the concept owner. They're your leader. They're your liaison when you want to talk to management. And that person can be technical oriented or not, could be business line oriented. But if it's not business line, you still need a P&L owner with you, because data in a report has to become actionable. So that means you need a business line leader with you too, who can take it to whoever that frontline team is, whether it's sales or service, and they can help you validate that information is unique, relevant, and help you understand how you put that into action so you can feed that outcome back into back into data and keep the cycle going. And then I always thought my secret sauce, and I'll call it a TAZI product owner, but it's a product owner. It's that person who is going to be kind of the geeky person who can still talk to the front line and like listen to the front line, give you what you need to talk to management, but they become the product owner because you want them to use that tool and understand it and grow with it and be able to manipulate it as you have learnings and feedback, both from the front line and from management and from your technical partners. So I think you need a concept owner, a business line leader, if that's not the concept owner, and then a TAZI product owner. And then my last tip would be I always included my risk, I'll call it the risk partner. It could be risk, compliance, audit, but I always included one of them up front. And I try not to I don't want to waste their time, but I want to make them hear the beginning of the story, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, because that keeps them, I think, makes them comfortable to hear how we're doing it. I would never try to sell something and be irresponsible, as an example, from a compliance standpoint. And if they hear that as you go into the project, if they learn about how you're framing the effort, they learn more about the tool, then they'll be a good partner to upfront help you build whatever you need for output to audit and double check that the tool is working well. And any of the common, myths or worries that people have about AI tools can be listed, assessed, and put to rest, hopefully.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And again, we're kind of going back to, yes, for sure, starting small, definitely small tiger teams. We've seen that to work really well. We work with banks that have one data person. That's plenty. So we do look always for, is there somebody that can just give us that Excel sheet? And then as soon as possible, right, as you mentioned, bring the business team forward. And, actually the whole TAZI, we started with this dream and this idea of really bringing AI and this, pretty deep technology to the business folks, right? And kind of democratizing that away from just kind of pure technical teams. And so when we do that, we see a lot of magic happen because it's the business teams, it's the product owners, you call them, right? It's that business line leader that really can tell us, right? Like this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, and so fast because they know their business so well. And so we find that the combination of somebody that knows about data with somebody that really knows your business, it just moves things very, very fast, and it's exciting to watch. And frankly, AI is a learning process by design. I don't, sometimes I feel like that's not maybe understood either. It's constantly evolving, but it will continue to evolve by design. So that's not a reason, not to start iterating, really iterating constantly on solutions. I know, Cathy, you like to say like learn and improve, and that for sure has been working really well. So we talked about all these, amazing options out there, some, interesting use cases we've seen, how to do it. But of course, we're talking here about financial services, a very regulated industry, right? Where, of course, the very, very important question is how do you do all this, right? How do you do it and still keep the privacy, the auditability, the explainability tight, right? While also, trying to get some answers quickly, right? Trying to deliver quickly.
Well, I think the first component you explain better than I do, which is that how your tool works, right? But from my layman's view of this is that I can leverage a TAZI tool and I can start this AI journey and keep it going. And really my data is with me. It's my tool, my data. So it's not like I'm sending anything out into the world that can be at risk. And it's very transparent. So I can set up upfront my audit tools so that I can have confidence that the tool is not creating outcomes that are artificially slanted towards something that would not meet the best interest of a client or a regulatory concern. But maybe you can explain that a little bit more than I can.
Yeah, it's a super important question and ever evolving too, right? As we continue to expect more and more from a regulation perspective. But you're right. I mean, we have been implementing AI solutions now for 10 years, really starting with machine learning, right? And traditional AI and in banks, in wealth management firms. And we have learned a lot. We had to learn a lot. And what we have seen is there are definitely some table stakes today, right? So things that absolutely have to exist, which is transparency into the technology and the explainability of the technology, right? A solution absolutely cannot be a black box, right? Teams that are using AI, they have to know how decision is made. They have to know how that recommendation is made to them. You're right. You mentioned TAZI being your tool. Yes, we've learned that we have to implement TAZI and install it on the bank side. And that really secures the data. Nowadays, of course, we use LLMs, we use agents, and all of those with LLMs, we often use local LLMs. So really, really making sure that that data doesn't get out and that it's locked. And as the technology continues to evolve, and of course now we have agentic solutions, we had to make sure that those agents are rooted in data and they're rooted in the truth of the customer data, right? So they're not going out looking at the web world and hallucinating, that they're really, really looking at really just the explanations of models and then interpreting those to all of us humans, right, that want quick answers, those insights and action plans. And we've seen some of the larger organizations that are trying to build and themselves, right? And one thing that I think is a little bit of a trap is piloting is actually really fast. Doing tests and pilots with AI today, showing some ideas is really fast. But what we have learn ourselves and what we see teams are learning now is that when you try to put that idea into production, right, at scale and securely, it actually becomes quite complex and difficult process like any other technology process. And it really has to go through the whole technology life cycle. And so that's what we're finding is that folks are really more and more looking to partner. And if you do have, partners with some of the expertise at the table, it's really actually a faster and safer way to go as what we've seen.
And we're focused on mid-sized banks here, so I think that becomes a little more complicated discussion for them because if you're JP Morgan Chase, you're building huge teams and you're building these things for yourself. That's their journey, right? So, and that's different. And if you're small, you've got to partner with somebody, and your worry is, can you trust your partner? When you're in the mid-size, you can do a blend, right? So I think finding that sweet spot where you've got a trusted partner, but you are engaged in the process that builds confidence for you, that is, I think, advantageous versus being a small, maybe that has to depend and trust and worry about the partner more holistically, So I think that's a benefit in working with you for a mid-sized bank because they can have that blend of partnership.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
And it is constantly really evolving and learning process. Speaking of, now we talked a little bit about, how to do it securely, and that is possible to do it, which is, I think, again, a great news. Turning a little bit to the value, right? AI should not be a toy, should not just be left at curiosity, right? It needs to drive value. And I see so many, headlines these days. Does it drive value? How much? Can we measure it? And so on, right? That's still very much looked for outcome. What have you kind of seen? And just from your own experience, right, in implementing technology, what should leaders measure to how the pilot work?
Yeah, we had conversations like this a lot in the day when I was in the C-suite running revenue generating projects and moving into digital capabilities. And each project had to be justified on its own. And then we would have these conversations that, well, are you really getting incremental value? Because really one thing's layered on another thing, and how do you set it apart? So in my experience, what enabled me to get a yes from management to go forward would be one, in your pilot, set your goals more around what you can learn that you wouldn't have understood before that's actionable. So in a pilot, you might say, I just want, let's say it's retention and you're providing a meaningful list for your sales force to work. And what I would want to know out of that is one, did we work everything on the list? So if I had 1,000 leads, did I work 1,000 leads? From a salesperson's perspective, how many of those interactions were more productive for them than if they didn't have the list? So keep it really honed on a pilot into the actions and the content first, and that proves the tool. So then as you start feeding those insights back in and you start repeating the process, then you can build a KPI that would be measurable against, let's say, on retention. If let's say your net roll off for the year used to be 3%, and you think cutting that by 0.5% is meaningful, then you could track that over a duration of a year, checking in, let's say, quarterly. But you set your KPI and you report out on that for the whole year, and you see if you made progress for the whole year. So in that case, you've got a manageable KPI and you watch it over time. So that's where I would start. You want to take it straight into, and TAZI's always good about this, what's the revenue impact? And your finance people will help you figure that out. You can say, here's the average value of a client. You can say, here's the average value of retention or less attrition. But I would keep it into metrics that are number oriented, the number of clients you kept, the number of clients you grew, the number of contacts you made, because those are measurable. And then you can put that into an ROI model, as needed.
Totally makes sense. And you're right. What we have learned from starting with the pilot, right? It's really important to establish that as success criteria before you even start, just to think through that, right? And what would value actually look like? Luckily, right, when we're talking about growth, it's so measured, right? Sales and marketing activities are probably the best measured efforts in the bank. So there is already a lot of data today on what today looks like. And so we found that if we can kind of find a baseline, what is done today and what those results look like, and then set, as you said, some of those goals in terms of what great would look like, and then be able to measure, right, that before and after. And you're right, initially, you're really going to get the insights and need to implement those and then be able to establish those KPIs. But, believe it or not, we haven't seen a single implementation that didn't provide at least 30% lift across the board, both, of course, on efficiency, but more importantly, on the growth, whether that's reducing, attrition or deepening wallet share and so on. So there usually always is value in kind of moving from more random process to a predicted process, right? And that's probably also just logical. We talked about starting small, one business problem at a time, but probably on people's mind by now is how do you, then expand, right? Without starting from scratch each and every time. Any thoughts there?
I do. So let's say you've completed your pilot, you're through your 90-day effort, and you've got your meaningful initial output. I would have that core team then either tackle the next thing that they wish to solve for on their journey. All right. So, or if you want to take it to the next team or division or group, have that team tell their story. So let's say you just solved in the small business unit of your mid-sized bank, you solved a retention issue for the small business team, and they're excited about it, and their leader and their point person and their product owner are all excited. Then have that team then go talk to, let's say, the consumer team that's in your market that has the highest growth expectations for the year, and explain to them what they did, and then repeat the cycle. Brainstorm what's the major obstacle that's keeping you from growing, or what's the biggest help I could give you to meet your growth expectations, and then set up that team to tackle their next problem. Because I think a successful team then brings that passion to the next team. Sort of like one agile team launching the next agile team.
Yep.
So if you're doing service, then let's say the consumer lending group solves their problem, then they teach it to the commercial lending team.
Yeah, it's you're so right. We've been doing this for a little while. We've had business teams that have been implementing AI for years now, way before it was so popular. And it's exactly that's what happened is that initial team kind of became the de facto, knowledgeable team on how to do AI successfully. Everybody wants to have these new skills, right? They were really passionate about, first of all, their own ideas, because the thing with AI is that there is no shortage of what you would like to find out or what you would like to optimize. So we find them that they always have ideas, but then, it became easier, like you said, going across the organization and just kind of rinse and repeat that process that worked with other teams. And then, them being able to do it faster as well. And we've also found that, data, when it comes to growth, kind of the baseline data is actually similar, right? Same data across a lot of different problems and a lot of different questions. So we really have seen kind of those economies of scale is once you answer the first question, answering the next question, especially when you have now the process and the knowledgeable folks that have done it once, truly actually does become rinse and repeat. And then it's just more kind of back to the start of our conversation, right? Like prioritizing, what are people passionate about? And where do they want to start kind of on their journey?
I agree 100%. For over 20 years, I taught at the Consumer Bankers Association Graduate School of Banking. And in that, we would always start with the fundamentals that in order to grow your bank, you needed to understand your customer. And we would talk about the intersection of data points. And to me, what we're doing with AI is it just allows me to take in more data points, but I still have to find that sweet spot. And that functions around the core needs of customers and the core needs that banking's always helped meet. Now, how we do it keeps changing, right? Keeps evolving. But the core of the sweet spot is still the same. So, I think that, kind of reinforces what we're saying here.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation, of course, and we can talk a lot about this as we always do. But we'll wrap it up today. I think we shared quite a bit. So just kind of as the summary, right, Cathy, what would be one message that you would give bankers that are thinking today about AI?
My advice is one, don't be fearful. Two, pick a place to start. Just pick a place to start and be excited about it and look for what unique, actionable insights that your data can give you, your data partner can give you. Look for that and keep it focused on the customer. I don't think we win if all this talk and all these capabilities don't stay focused on the customer.
Absolutely. And honestly, I can't emphasize enough. Start small with the data you have at hand. We hear so many times, big data projects to get ready for AI, but what we've seen in reality is that very little data is needed to really get started with AI and get value. And at the end of the day, you actually really won't know until you try it yourself. So even if slight curiosity is there, we've seen try it before you buy and you'll know very, very quickly. Well, thank you so much, Cathy. Thank you, everybody, for watching this fireside chat. We hope that we were able to share some practical ideas and useful ideas here to help you determine how you would want to start or continue exploring AI.